Last time on this story, it started with a tube of Pringles, then a documentary about Arctic birds, then a pen with no thank you, and then nothing. 2 closed doors, 2 children who moved mountains to get their parents together and cannot currently get themselves to the same side of a room. Kai, who hears everything, whose light was on until 1 in the morning, who did not knock. Anne, who cried through a wall, who waited for someone to come and didn't. And in the kitchen at 9:30 on a Friday evening, Korea's most feared mafia boss and the woman who made him sit in a tiny plastic chair looked at each other across a table and decided the children matchmake their parents. Now the parents are going to return the favour. The mission, get Kai and Anne talking again. The method, chocolate. The problem, these are not ordinary children. This is part 4. If you missed part 1, 2 and 3, the link will be placed in the comments section. Please do look them up. And if you're new here, please hit the subscription and notification bell, as this is the only way you can support us. Saturday morning. Early. The kind of early that belonged to people with plans. Rebecca was at the kitchen table with a notepad and a mug of coffee she had forgotten was there. She had written 3 things on the notepad and crossed 2 of them out. The one that remained had been underlined twice, which was not something she usually did, which meant she felt strongly about it, which Sung Jin could see from where he was standing at the counter with a bag from the shop that contained more chocolate than any reasonable person needed before 9 in the morning. Kwon had helped him choose. Kwon had opinions. The sour worms had been Kwon's specific recommendation on the grounds that Anne would notice their absence, and the absence of something Anne expected was, in his professional assessment, a variable worth controlling. Sung Jin had not argued with this. Kwon was usually right. He sat down across from her. "What do we know?" Rebecca said. Not to him specifically, to the notepad, to the situation. "We know they've stopped talking," he said. "We know they've stopped talking. What else?" "Kai is bottling something," he said. "He's been quiet in a specific way. I know this quiet. This quiet has a history." He put his mug down. "When he was 8, I rearranged his bookshelf. I was trying to be helpful. I put everything by size because the varying heights were bothering me." He said nothing. He said nothing for 6 days. On the 7th day he came to breakfast, and he was perfectly pleasant, and he ate his toast, and he went to school, and I thought, fine, he adjusted, it's resolved. He paused. That evening I found every single item on my desk had been moved exactly 3 centimetres to the left. Not dramatically, not obviously, just 3 centimetres. Enough that I would notice, nothing I could point to. He never said a word about the bookshelf. I never said a word about the desk, but we both knew. Rebecca stared at him. "He was 8, she said. "He's always been like this," Sung Jin said. "So what you're telling me," she said slowly, "is that your son conducts silent psychological warfare rather than saying, 'Daddy, please don't touch my bookshelf.' He finds direct confrontation inefficient," Sung Jin said. "He finds..." Rebecca pressed her lips together. "Right. And Anne?" She sat back. "Anne is the opposite. Anne does not bottle. Anne performs. She woke up the morning after crying through that wall, came downstairs, ate her toast, drank her juice, and said good morning like a woman who had just returned from a very relaxing holiday. Zero evidence. Completely unbothered." She paused. She also said good morning to the chair. "The chair Kai hadn't sat in yet," Sung Jin said. "She said it cheerfully," Rebecca said. "That's the part. Not pointedly, not loudly, cheerfully, like the chair was a perfectly adequate substitute, and she wanted it to know she harboured no ill feelings toward it personally. Also looks like in her head, Kai is not better than the chair." Sung Jin looked at her. "My daughter said good morning to a chair," Rebecca said. "Cheerfully, that's where we are." They sat with that. The problem, the real problem underneath the Pringles and the documentary and the pen was that Kai and Anne were too similar in exactly the wrong way. Not in personality, they were not the same person, and the suggestion would have offended both of them in their respective precise and thorough ways. But in the specific architecture of how they handled rupture, both of them went quiet. Both of them waited for the other person to move first. Both of them got more stubborn the longer the other person didn't move, which meant without intervention this could continue indefinitely, which was not acceptable. "We made this problem," Rebecca said. "We contributed significantly," Sung Jin said, "genetically. And by example." They sat with that too. The full specific weight of two people sitting inside their own irony. Then Rebecca turned the notepad around. Sung Jin read it, looked up. "It's thorough," he said. "I've been sitting on it for 4 days," she said. He looked at the notepad again, then at the bag, then at the corridor with its 2 closed doors. "You wrote this before I bought the chocolate," he said. "The chocolate was always going to be part of it," she said. "I just needed you to arrive at it independently." Sung Jin looked at his wife, at this woman who had arrived at a 14-step plan before he had arrived at the confectionery aisle. He thought about a drawing of a house with 2 figures in the window. "He got it from me," he said. "He got the strategy from you," Rebecca said. "The patience he got from me. The combination is either very impressive or a significant problem depending on which side of it you're on." "We're on the correct side," he said. "We'd better be," she said, "because the alternative is 2 children conducting a silent Cold War in this house, and none of us will even know it's happening until someone's desk is 3 centimeters to the left." Sung Jin opened his mouth, closed it. "We need to understand what actually happened," Rebecca continued, "from both sides, before we fix anything, and we can't ask them directly because—" "Anne will say she's fine," he said. "Anne will say she's fine, cheerfully, possibly to a piece of furniture, and Kai will—" "Say nothing and make very specific eye contact." "So we observe," she said, "carefully." She went to the door, stopped. "Sung Jin?" "When you went to Kwon about the chocolate?" "Yes." "Did he already know about the situation with the children?" A pause. "He had observations," Sung Jin said. "He's thorough." Rebecca absorbed this. Her family's security detail had formed independent conclusions about the emotional standoff between 2 10-year-olds and had apparently been sitting on them. "Of course he did," she said, and she went to make more coffee. Kai's room. Same morning. He was at his desk, not doing homework. There was no homework. It was Saturday. But sitting at his desk in the way he sat there when he was organizing his thoughts, which he did at his desk because that was what a desk was for. He had a book open in front of him. He had not turned a page in 22 minutes. He was composing a document, a mental one, the kind that required no paper but would have been, had it been committed to paper, extremely well structured with numbered points and supporting evidence cited clearly beneath each one. He had been composing it for 14 days. It was nearly complete. The document was titled, "Internally, Precisely, the Situation." Fact 1. The Pringles. He had purchased a tube of Pringles on a Thursday, original flavour, from the shop on the corner, with his own money. He had placed them in the cupboard above the microwave. His cupboard, not the snack cupboard, not the general cupboard, the cupboard that was his, a designation that had been established in the house rules and was not ambiguous to anyone who had read the house rules, which they both had, because they had written them together, and had gone to his room. Friday morning. The Pringles were not there. He had stood in front of the open cupboard for 3 full minutes, which was, for Kai, who did not stand in front of open cupboards for extended periods, under ordinary circumstances, a significant amount of time to stand in front of an open cupboard. They were in the snack cupboard. She had moved them. He was going to be fair. He was always going to be fair. She had opinions about the kitchen. Those Opinions had their own internal logic. The cupboard above the microwave was, in her system, for pasta. He understood this. He had mapped her system. He knew exactly how it worked. He had in fact memorized it entirely within the first 2 weeks, because that was the kind of person he was, and he found it useful to understand how other people's systems worked, even when those systems were organized by color and therefore scientifically unsound. But she had not told him. She had moved an item belonging to him without telling him, and she had eaten some. He knew because the tube had been open. Sealed Pringles did not unseal themselves by proximity to the snack cupboard. This was not how Pringles worked, and she had opened them and eaten some, and said nothing. Not, "Kai, I moved your Pringles. I hope that's all right." Not, "Kai, I had a few, thank you." Not even, "Your Pringles are somewhere different now, just a heads up." She had sat at breakfast the following morning and eaten her triangles of toast and said good morning like someone who had not opened another person's property, helped herself, and found the entire sequence of events entirely unremarkable. He wanted to be precise about something in the document. He was not saying she was a bad person. He was not saying her intentions were bad. What he was saying was that there was a principle. Several principles, in fact, which he had organized into a clear hierarchy. There was the principle of asking. There was the principle of acknowledging. There was the principle of thank you. And there was, at the top of the hierarchy, underlined, the principle of not proceeding as though none of it had happened. She had violated all 4, in ascending order of severity. Fact 2. The pen. He had handed her his spare pen without being asked. Her pen had run out mid-equation, and he had noticed and held his out, because that was something a person did when they lived alongside another person. That was a gesture. It existed within a specific frequency they had established together. The frequency of 2 people who had developed a familiarity, a shorthand, a way of occupying the same space that did not require ceremony for small things. She had taken the pen, used it, set it down between them, and said nothing. He was going to say that again in the document, for emphasis. She had said nothing. He understood. He was being fair. He was always being fair. That between them, thank you had not always been required. Small things happened without ceremony. This was established. This was part of the frequency, but the pen had come after the Pringles. And when things came after other things, context existed. Context was relevant. The pen was no longer a small thing. The pen was evidence. Evidence of what, specifically? He had circled this part of the document, come back to it several times. The conclusion was uncomfortable, but the conclusion was the conclusion, and he was not a person who avoided conclusions simply because they were uncomfortable. Evidence that she took things for granted, that she had looked at the frequency between them and decided it was simply there, like furniture, like a fixture, like something that required no maintenance because it had always been there and would presumably continue to always be there, regardless of whether anyone paid it any attention. He stood up, went to his window, looked out at the Saturday morning going about its business, entirely unbothered by the Pringles situation. The other thing, the thing underneath all of it, the thing that made the Pringles heavier than Pringles had any business being, was that she was fine. He could hear her in the next room, moving her books around, humming something to herself, going about her Saturday with the unbothered energy of someone who had no ongoing mental document and was not composing one at their desk instead of reading a book. She was fine, completely, audibly, entirely fine. And he was? He wanted to be precise about this in the document. He was not upset. He was noting there was a difference. He was noting that she was fine, and noting that her being fine suggested she had either not noticed what he had noticed, or had noticed and it had not registered the way it should have, or, and this was the part he kept returning to and not finishing, she simply did not place the same weight on things between them as he did, which would mean the weight was one-sided. Does she even care that we're siblings now? She moves around like we are fine. Why am I even bothered? I am 10, this should not bother me, Kai said to himself. And if he is right, it would mean he had miscalculated. Kai did not miscalculate. He went back to his desk, sat down. She could have just asked. That was the part that sat at the very bottom of the document, beneath all the numbered points and the evidence and the 4 hierarchical principles. She could have just asked. He would have said, yes, immediately. There had never been a version of that question where the answer was no. He would have opened the tube himself and held it out, and none of this would have happened. She could have just asked. Breakfast in 10 minutes, his father said through the door. Okay, he said. He picked up the book, looked at the page he had not read for 22 minutes. To nobody, in the quiet of his room, in the voice he used when he had arrived at a conclusion and was now done with it, he said, she could have just asked. The room, as expected, agreed with him completely. Anne's room. Same morning. She was reorganizing her bookshelf. Not because it needed reorganizing. The system was sound. The system had always been sound. And anyone with concerns about the system was welcome to keep those concerns to themselves. But because she thought better when her hands were doing something, and this was a morning that required thinking, she was not upset. She wanted to be clear about that. To herself, in the specific internal tone she used when she was being precise about something important, she was not upset. She had assessed the situation. She had adjusted accordingly. She was living inside the adjustment very comfortably, and that was not being upset. That was being sensible. There was a difference. She knew the difference. The books moved back and forth in their colour sections. Orange on the left, green in the middle, purple on the right. The section that mattered most, the books she had read more than once, the things she kept returning to. The thing about Kai, and she was going to be fair, she was always going to be fair, was that he had a whole world, a very complete, very organised, very Kai-shaped world that had existed long before she arrived in it and had very little interest in making room on the sofa. His books, his desk, his system for everything, his documentaries, specifically his documentaries. She needed to talk about the documentary. It had been a Tuesday. His rotation. She knew it was his rotation. She had not gone into that living room to fight about the rotation. The rotation was the rotation. She was a reasonable person. She had simply gone in because sometimes you want to be in the same room as someone, not doing anything particular, not having a conversation or a project or a whole agenda, just in the same room, existing alongside another person, because that is its own kind of company, and she had not realized how much she had come to rely on it until the careful distance had made all the rooms feel larger than she remembered. So she had gone in, sat in the armchair, said the thing about the same coastline 3 times, which she stood by completely. That was not navigation that was a problem. Those birds needed help. And Kai had said they were using magnetic field orientation, and she had said they had been on that coastline 3 times, and he had said that was the nature of the migration pattern, and she had counted quietly to herself, and at 11 minutes, 11, she had understood that she could sit in that armchair until every Arctic bird found its way home, and he would not look over once. Not once. She moved a purple book 2 spaces to the right, moved it back. She was not going to be dramatic about this. She was 10 years old, and she was a reasonable person, and she was simply noting, the way reasonable people noted things, that she had been right there, in the armchair, for 11 minutes, and he had been entirely absorbed in his birds with the complete focus of someone for whom the living room currently contained 1 person and 1 television and nothing else of interest, like I was not there. Now here is something about the Anne and Kai's saga. The Pringles were not the thing he was making them. This needed to be stated clearly in the document she was also composing, which was less structured than Kai's but had better instincts. She had moved them because they were in the wrong cupboard. That was not her rule, that was simply the logical conclusion of kitchen organisation. Pasta lived in the microwave cupboard, snacks lived in the snack cupboard. This was not a complicated system, this was just how kitchens worked. She had moved them to the correct location, and she had meant to tell him, and she had forgotten, because there were no fewer than 11 other things happening in her head at that particular moment, and the Pringles, she was sorry to say, had not ranked highly enough to survive the competition. And yes, she had had some. She had opened them, just to confirm the flavour, just to check they were the correct ones, original not sour cream. These were important distinctions. And she had had a few while she was doing something else, and she had not sat down and treated it as a whole event, because it was not a whole event. It was 4 Pringles, out of a full tube, which she had relocated to a more logical cupboard as a courtesy to the household. Frankly, he should have said thank you. She picked up an orange book, put it back, and the pen. The pen was not a statement. She had been in the middle of an equation that was not going well, and he had held out the pen, and she had taken it, and used it, and the thank you had gotten lost somewhere in the mathematics, and by the time she remembered to say it, the moment had already passed, and the next moment had arrived, and saying it then would have required explaining why she hadn't said it earlier, which would have required acknowledging the whole thing, and the whole thing was sitting between them like a chair someone had put in the middle of the room that neither of them had agreed to buy. She sat on the end of her bed. The wall was in front of her. On the other side of the wall was Kai and his book and his 22 unread pages, though she did not know about the 22 unread pages. What she knew was that it was quiet in there in the specific way it had been quiet for 14 days. The careful quiet of someone who was in and had decided to stay in. She looked at the sour worms on her bedside table, took one. The thing was, and she was going to be honest with herself because she was always honest with herself, even when it was uncomfortable, she had adjusted. She had made a distance and arranged herself inside it, and it was a perfectly functional distance, and she was perfectly fine in it, which was, if she was being honest, the problem. Because being fine in the distance sent a message. It said the distance was acceptable, that she could manage without the frequency they had built, that the frequency had perhaps not been as essential as she had let herself believe, and if it was not essential, then she had needed it more than he had, and if she had needed it more than he had, then she had simply been the person sitting in the armchair for 11 minutes while he watched his birds. She was not going to think about that anymore. She was going to eat a sour worm and reorganize her bookshelf and be absolutely fine, because she was completely fine and there was nothing on her mind and she had no ongoing concerns of any kind. She was fine. I really want to talk to him so bad, but it seems like he doesn't want to talk to me, and I'm not going to him first. I'm the girl and girls are treated like princess. The boys always comes to the girls, Anne said to herself. A knock at the door. Come in, she said in the bright, easy voice of someone with an entirely clear conscience and a Saturday going exactly as planned. Breakfast in 10, her mother said through the slightly open door. Lovely, thank you, Mummy, Anne said, warm and cheerful and unbothered. The door closed. Anne held the expression for 3 seconds, then let it fall off her face, looked at the wall. She had been right there, in the armchair, for 11 minutes. She had been right there, and he had not looked over once, and if he had just looked over once, just to check she was there, just to acknowledge that the armchair was occupied by a person and not a decorative object. One look, that was all. She ate another sour worm. One look, she said to the wall, in barely a voice at all. The wall, like the Arctic birds, did not appear to know where it was going. Anne put the sour worms in her purple section, things she came back to, and went to wash her face before breakfast. Breakfast happened. Both children came downstairs separately and within 90 seconds of each other and moved around the kitchen with the careful choreography of two people who had developed a system for occupying the same space without actually being in it together. Toast, orange juice, opposite sides of the table, monosyllabic responses to direct questions delivered pleasantly in the voices of two children who were fine and had nothing further to add on any subject. Anne said good morning to the chair. Kai looked at the chair, poured his orange juice with a precision that was, in Sung Jin's private assessment, approximately 11% greater than usual. He asked if she wanted more toast. She said no, thank you very pleasantly. He made himself one more piece of toast he did not want, and ate it in the focused manner of someone who had not noticed he did not want it. Rebecca watched all of this over the rim of her coffee mug without moving her head. When the children went back upstairs, she opened the notepad. He tried, she said. The toast, Sungjin said. He asked if she wanted more. That's something. She didn't notice. She noticed, Rebecca said. Anne notices everything. She just filed it under too late. Under, I've already adjusted. Under, I am not going to let myself need something and then not get it. A pause. She learned that from me. I'm aware. Sungjin said nothing, which was the correct response. And Kai learned the quiet trying from you, she continued, which means without intervention this situation will last until one of them is 40, because they are both protecting themselves from each other, and they are 10 years old, and they should not be protecting themselves from each other. They should be arguing about the television remote. They're still arguing about the television remote, Sung Jin said. It just has more subtext now. Rebecca looked at him. Last Thursday, he said. Anne changed the channel during a commercial break. Kai said nothing. The following morning his spare pen was on her side of the desk. Rebecca stared at him. He moved his own pen, she said, to her side. As a statement. As a precise and deniable statement, Sungjin said. Yes. He moved his pen 3 centimeters to send a message about a television remote. 2 centimeters, Sungjin said. He's escalating slowly. Rebecca sat back in Jam Chanjiaj, her chair, and looked at the ceiling briefly in the manner of a woman asking it for patience. Right, she said. The plan. The plan, he said. They need something between them that isn't the gap, she said. A project. Something long enough that the politeness runs out before the project does. Because once the politeness runs out, they'll fight. And once they fight, they'll actually talk. Right, she said. And the chocolate sets the table, he said. They used it. We use it. We put it in their space, and they know we have a plan, and we know they know, and they sit down anyway, Rebecca said, because underneath all of it, they want to. They looked at each other across the kitchen table, two people who had required a coffee shop and an art exhibition and a car park in the cold and 14 months, and a plan with no plan D to find each other. Sitting in their kitchen on a Saturday morning, designing a plan for 2 10-year-olds who were conducting silent psychological warfare over a tube of Pringles and a pen. We made this problem, Rebecca said. We made this problem, he agreed, genetically and by example. Yes. She stood up now, looked at the corridor, at the 2 closed doors. Sungjin, she said. The night she cried through the wall, and his light was on until 1. Yes? Did he go to her door? A pause. The specific pause of a man deciding whether to say something he has been carrying since the night it happened. He sat outside it, Sungjin said quietly, on the floor, for 8 minutes, then got up and went back to his room. Rebecca was very still. On the floor, she said, at 11:30 at night. She looked at the corridor, at her daughter's door, at the boy behind the other one who had sat on a cold floor in the dark at 11:30 at night because he wanted to go in and did not know how to go in, without it meaning something he wasn't ready for it to mean. She looked back at Sung Jin. "We are fixing this today," she said. "Yes," he said. She picked up the notepad, picked up the bag of chocolate, and went to set the table. Rebecca had been in the living room for 20 minutes before anyone came downstairs. She had placed a box on the coffee table, wrapped in brown paper with a piece of tape at each corner. Practical, not decorative, which was the correct register for something that was not supposed to look like a plan. Inside the box were 63 photographs. She had printed them the previous day while the children were at school, sorted them into preliminary groups, kept the doubles of the ones where both children appeared together, and arranged them in a specific order designed to look like no order at all. On top of the box sat an empty photo album, and beside it, the chocolate, placed with the casualness of something that had been positioned very carefully. Sung Jin had moved it 3 inches to the left when he said it looked too deliberate, and he had been right, and she was not going to tell him he had been right, but she had left it where he moved it. The photograph on the very top of the pile, the first thing either of them would see when they opened the box, was the wedding photo. Front row, both of them in their formal clothes. Kai with his tie sitting exactly right, because he had checked it 4 times that morning. Anne with her dress not quite sitting right because she had been fidgeting with it since 7 a.m. and had not stopped, neither of them looking at the camera. Both of them looking forward at their parents at the front of the room. And in the specific angle of both of their bodies, the slight unconscious orientation toward each other that neither of them appeared to have noticed they were doing, something that was, if you were paying attention, completely unmistakable. Rebecca had looked at this photograph for a long time before putting it on top. She had originally planned the album as an anniversary gift. She was repurposing it. It was adjacent to an anniversary gift. Sung Jin was in it. The family was in it. These were technicalities, and she was comfortable with them. Sung Jin appeared in the doorway. He looked at the table, at the box and the album, and the chocolate sitting 3 inches to the left of where she had originally put it. "You moved the chocolate," he said. "You moved the chocolate," she said. "I left it where you moved it." He looked at it. "It's better there," he said. "I know," she said in a tone that communicated that she had also known, but had needed him to arrive at it independently, which he understood and which he chose not to comment on. He came and stood beside her, and they both looked at the table. "They'll know we planned this," he said. "Of course they'll know," she said. "Anne will figure it out before she sits down. Kai will figure it out while he's sitting down, and spend 10 minutes deciding whether to acknowledge that he's figured it out, and then decide against it, because acknowledging it would mean explaining how he figured it out, and that would require telling us he had been watching us, which he has been, and he won't want to give that away." Sung Jin looked at his wife. "You know our children very well," he said. "I've been paying attention," she said. "It's a gift." He almost said something about where that particular phrase came from in this household. He decided against it. The plan itself was simple. Simpler than anything Kai and Anne had constructed over 14 months of weather forecasts and coffee shop logistics and art exhibition submissions and waiting on cold walls until feeling left 1 foot temporarily. It relied on a single observation that Rebecca had written on the notepad, underlined twice, and not crossed out. Anne did not start things she did not finish, and Kai did not decline things Anne said yes to, because declining required explaining why, and Kai did not explain things he could avoid explaining, so they would sit down. They would have something between them. They would argue about how to do it, because they always argued about how to do things, because their systems were different, and neither of them could leave a system alone if it seemed improvable. and once they were arguing about the system, the careful distance would stop being the thing they were managing, and somewhere inside the argument, the real thing, the actual thing, the thing that had been sitting in closed rooms for 14 days, would find its way to the surface. That was the theory. It did not have a plan D. It had chocolate and 63 photographs and 2 children who had never once, not in all the months since they first sat across from each other at a lunch table with a shared objective, been able to look at a photograph of themselves together without going just slightly still. Rebecca had noticed this. She had filed it. She had been waiting for the right moment to use it. "Go and call them," she said. Sung-jin went to the corridor. Rebecca looked at the table one final time, adjusted nothing, put her hands in her pockets. "Kai," Sung-jin called up the stairs. Even, unhurried, the voice of a man with no particular agenda on a Saturday morning. "Anne, living room when you're ready." A pause. 2 doors opened, 2 sets of footsteps. Not together. Not at the same time, but both coming, which was, for now, enough. They stood on opposite sides of the coffee table, both of them looking at the box and the album and the chocolate with the specific expression of 2 people trying very hard not to be the first one to react, which meant both of them had already reacted and were managing it, which Rebecca clocked from the sofa and filed immediately under. "Good. We're already somewhere." Sung-jin explained it simply. Photographs from the wedding and the months after. They'd thought it would be nice to have an album. Busy weekend. Would the children mind putting it together? A pause in which both children looked at the box, and both children looked at the chocolate, and both children looked at each other briefly, and then looked away. Anne opened the box. She looked at the photograph on top, the front row photo. Both of them in their formal clothes, looking forward, 4 inches apart, oriented unmistakably toward each other in a way neither of them had apparently noticed at the time. She looked at it for a moment longer than she needed to, then set it down carefully, as though it had edges. Then they discussed the system. This took 4 minutes and resolved nothing. Anne wanted thematic organization, by mood, by location, by what she called the feeling of the thing, which Kai found imprecise to the point of being not a system at all, but simply a description of having feelings near photographs. Kai proposed chronological with subject groupings nested within each date range, and said that was just 2 layers of the same system, and he was calling it a combined approach when it was a Kai approach with a different name. He said that was not what that was. She said that was exactly what that was, and could he name one element of the proposed system that had originated from anyone other than himself? He opened his mouth, closed it, said the subject groupings had been informed by a pause, general best practice. Anne looked at him. He looked at the album. She looked at the album. Rebecca said perhaps they could start with the photos and see how it developed, in the voice of someone who was not managing anything and found all of this very casual indeed. They sat down. The distance they chose was large enough to be comfortable and small enough to be explainable, and within 15 minutes the chocolate had migrated to the center of the table without either of them appearing to have moved it. It was simply there, between them, equidistant and accessible. Rebecca noticed this from the sofa, did not say anything to Sung-jin. He had already seen it. It was going well. Anne held up a photograph and asked what day this was. Kai said the second Saturday, the soufflé Saturday. Anne went very still. He told her about the soufflé, about the bin, about the 4 videos her father had watched before he showed her the egg white technique, which he had done because he wanted to get it right, which he had done because she had wanted to learn, which was the kind of information that required a moment to be properly filed once it arrived. Anne looked at her father across the room. Sung-jin was looking at his phone, or performing looking at his phone, with the focused neutrality of a man who was definitely not listening. She set the soufflé photograph gently to one side and did not say anything for a moment, and Kai returned to his sorting and let her process it, which was, though neither of them would have called it this, an act of consideration. Then Kai found the photograph he had been looking for since he opened the box. He had known it was in there. He had seen it before, once, briefly, and had thought about it since, with the specific quality of attention he gave to things that had not yet been resolved. He held it up. It was from before the documentary. The wall outside school, both of them, at lunch. He had the tube of Pringles, and his hand was extended, the tube tilted slightly toward her, caught in the precise moment between deciding to offer and the offer being made. She had already turned away, already half standing, already going inside. The photograph had recorded the moment that had not happened. Anne went still when she saw it. She looked at it for a long time. He said it was before the documentary. She said yes. He said he had been going to offer. He had been about to ask if she wanted some. She had already gone inside. She said before you what? He said nothing. She said Kai. He said it was just before. She said before you what? A pause. He said, I would have given you some. If you'd stayed, I was going to. Anne looked at the photograph. Then, at the table. The Pringles, she said. In the cupboard. I know you moved them for a reason, he said. I meant to tell you. I know you meant to. I had 4, she said. I know. A pause. Then, in the tone of someone saying something they had not intended to say in quite this setting, I counted what was left. She stared at him. He looked at his sorting. I was conducting a general inventory of the household snack situation. You counted how many of your Pringles I ate. I was being thorough. Kai. It wasn't about the number, he said. He looked at her. 4 was fine. 4 will always be fine. It was about the principle. I know, she said. And then, I'm sorry I didn't ask. And I'm sorry for the pen. I forgot. But I think even if I hadn't been busy, I'd already started the distance by then. So the thank you was smaller, because everything was smaller, and that wasn't fair. You made the distance first, she said. The documentary, she said. Yes. They looked at each other across the table with the photographs between them. You could have just looked over, she said. Once. I wasn't asking for anything else. I wasn't asking you to turn the television off or have a whole conversation. Just once. Just to check I was there. I know, he said, and then, carefully, in the voice he used when he was saying something he had been carrying for a while and was now prepared to set down, I knew you weren't there for the birds. I knew from the moment you came in. But we'd been careful for 2 weeks and you just sat down, and I didn't know what to do with you being there for a different reason. I didn't know how to be easy about it. So I watched the documentary. You watched 41 more minutes of Arctic birds, she said, rather than just look over. Yes. She looked at him. They weren't even lost, she said. You said they find their way in. The end. They were never lost. They knew exactly where they were going the entire time. A pause. That's correct, he said. So I sat in the armchair for 11 minutes, she said, while you watched birds who were not even lost. Another pause. That is, he said slowly, an accurate summary of events. Anne picked up the front row photograph, placed it on the first page of the album, looked at it sitting there. Then she opened the chocolate, broke a piece, set his half on the album between them without looking at him. He picked it up, ate it, reached into the pile and handed her a photograph. Second page, he said. You decide the order. Thematically, she said. Don't push it, he said. She almost smiled. Almost. She placed the second photograph. They kept going. At some point Kai said, without looking up from the pile, that he had moved his desk back toward the door. This afternoon, while she was putting the photographs away. She looked at him. He kept sorting. She looked at the wall between their rooms, then back at the album. Then she said she would move her bookshelf back too. Tonight. He said, okay. They kept going. The album filled up page by page in a system that was primarily chronological with thematic considerations, his chronology and her themes, which worked better than either of them had said it would, and neither of them acknowledged this out loud, because acknowledging it would require one of them to have been more right than the other, and they had decided, without saying so, that today was not a day for that particular conversation. At the end, Anne held up one last photograph, both of them on the doorstep, the wedding, morning before the ceremony, Kai telling Anne about the confetti, Anne looking at him with the look that was not the analytical look or the filing look, just the one that was simply looking. She said it should go on the back cover. He said that was the back cover, not a page. She said she knew that and things could go on the back cover. He said the convention for photo albums. She said they weren't following the convention, they had made their own system, and this photograph belonged at the end because it was the right ending, and she was not moving on this particular point. He looked at the photograph. At the album. At the photograph again. Then he took it from her and placed it on the back cover himself. Closed the album. It sat between them. Front page, both of them in the front row, looking forward, 4 inches apart, oriented toward each other in a way neither of them had noticed at the time. Back cover, both of them on the doorstep looking at each other, confetti in Anne's hair. Anne looked at it. "What were you saying to me?" she said. "In that photo. Do you remember?" "I told you you had confetti in your hair," he said. "Did I take it out?" "No, you said it could stay." They both looked at the closed album. "What were you actually going to say?" she said. "After the confetti." A pause. "I was going to say you looked like you belonged there," he said. The room was quiet in a different way than it had been quiet for 14 days. "Kai," she said, "it was just an observation." "I know it was an observation," she said. "You can say things like that. I'm not going anywhere. I live here, so whatever you notice, whatever you file, there's no rush. I'll be here." He looked at the album. "I heard you," he said. "That night, through the wall, I was going to come. Then why didn't you?" "Because you hadn't knocked," he said, "and I thought if you wanted me there you would have knocked, and you hadn't knocked, and I didn't want to come in for the wrong reason. I wanted to come because you wanted me to." "I wanted you to," she said. "I was waiting for you to." "I know that now." A pause. "If you knock," she said, "I'll open the door, even if things are bad, even if I've been crying over a documentary and some Pringles. I'll open it." "And if you knock," he said in the voice he used for things he was certain about, "I'll be there." She looked at him, the look that was just looking. Then she slid the remaining chocolate across the table to his side. He looked at it, looked at her. "That's yours," he said. "We'll split it," she said. "You always say that, and then you split it exactly in half, but somehow your half is slightly—" "Kai." He split the chocolate, handed her half. She took it. "The back cover was right," she said. "It was fine," he said. She looked at him. "It was right," he said quietly. Anne smiled. The real one. Not the performance. The underneath one, the one she got from her mother and had only recently stopped being careful with. The album was done. The chocolate was finished. And Kai and Anne were still at the table. Anne said sorry again. Just to be sure. She said it the way she said things she meant. Simply, without decoration. "Sorry for the Pringles. Sorry for the pen." Kai said it was fine. She said she knew it was fine now, but she was saying sorry anyway. He said, "Okay." She said, "Okay." Then she said, "Is there something I do that you don't like?" That I don't know about. Kai looked at her. You hum, he said. I hum. When you're doing homework, you hum the same part of the same song for 40 minutes. That bothers you. It doesn't bother me, he said. I just know the song now. I didn't choose to know the song. I simply know it now because it lives in my head permanently. What song is it? I don't know what it's called, he said. That's the problem. It's just in there, with no title, taking up space. Anne thought about this seriously. I'll hum the whole song, she said. Then at least it'll have an ending. That is not the solution I was looking for. It's the solution I have. A pause. Is there something I do, Kai said, that you don't like? Anne looked at the ceiling, then back at him. You correct me, she said, in front of people. I correct everyone in front of people. It's not personal. It feels personal when it's me. It's genuinely not personal, he said. I corrected Kwon last week. You corrected Kwon. He said the meeting was at 3. It was at 3:15. Precision matters. Anne stared at him. He has a gun, Kai. He also has a watch, Kai said. He should use it accurately. Anne looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Okay, don't correct me in front of people and I'll hum the whole song so it has an ending. That is a deeply uneven trade, he said. Take it or leave it, she said. He took it. From the sofa, Rebecca and Sung Jin watched their children shake on it over an empty chocolate wrapper. Rebecca looked at Sung Jin. Sung Jin looked at Rebecca. We're good at this, she said. Extremely good, he said. Better than them, arguably. Significantly better, he said. We did in one morning what they couldn't do in 14 days. With chocolate. With chocolate and 63 photographs, and approximately 30 years of combined emotional intelligence. Rebecca picked up her cold coffee. We should have done this 2 weeks ago. We should have, he said, but then it wouldn't have been as satisfying. She almost smiled. He almost smiled back. They were, by any measure, excellent parents. They were going to let each other believe that for the rest of the afternoon. It happened at lunch. Rebecca had made jollof rice. The good kind, the Sunday kind, the kind that had been on the stove long enough to have opinions about itself. Everyone was seated. Everything was fine. The album was on the sideboard. The chocolate was finished. The morning had gone exactly as planned. This was, in retrospect, the problem. Kai served himself rice with his usual precision. Anne poured her juice. Sung Jin reached for the serving spoon. Rebecca picked up her fork. Then Anne said, without looking up from her plate, You planned it. A pause. Planned what? Rebecca said in the voice of someone who had never planned anything in her life and found the suggestion mildly confusing. The album, Anne said. The chocolate. The whole thing. We thought it would be nice to have. You printed 63 photographs, Anne said, on a Friday, while we were at school. You put the wedding photo on top specifically. You moved the chocolate 3 inches to the left, so it didn't look deliberate. It looked deliberate. Silence. Rebecca looked at Sung Jin. Sung Jin looked at his rice. The sour worms, Kai said from his side of the table, in the tone of a man presenting Exhibit B. You put them outside Anne's door before. You called us downstairs. You never just leave snacks outside doors. You were setting conditions. I was being thorough, Kai said. You were being thorough, which is what you say when you have a plan, and the plan has variables you are trying to control. Another silence. Anne looked at Kai. Kai looked at Anne. The specific look of 2 people confirming that their independent investigations had arrived at the same conclusion. Also, Anne said, turning back to her parents, the notepad. Rebecca went very still. What notepad? She said. The one on the kitchen table this morning, Anne said, with the 2 crossed out items and the 1 underlined item. You crossed out 2 approaches before you settled on the album. which means the album was your third idea, which means you had been planning since at least last night. Sungjin put his fork down, looked at his son. Did you also... I saw the notepad at breakfast, Kai said simply. I read it upside down. It's a useful skill. I taught him that, Anne said. You did not teach me that. I mentioned it once. Mentioning something is not teaching. It clearly worked, Anne said. Kai considered this. Partially valid, he said. Rebecca set her fork down, looked at Sungjin, looked back at the children. Then she did something neither of them was expecting. She smiled, not the surface one, the underneath one. All right, she said. Yes, we planned it. A pause. The chocolate was your idea, Sungjin said to Rebecca. The photographs were my idea, she said. The chocolate was both our idea. Kwon helped with the sour worms, Sungjin said. Anne pointed at him. I knew Kwon was involved. He had opinions, Sungjin said. He always has opinions, Anne said. They're usually correct, Kai said. They were correct this time, Anne agreed. They all ate their rice for a moment. Then Kai said, It was good, the plan. Rebecca looked at her stepson. Not as good as ours, he said. Ours had more contingencies, and a weather forecast, and nobody lost feeling in their foot. But for a first attempt, he paused in the manner of someone being fair, it was competent. Competent, Sungjin said. The chocolate was the right call, Kai said. Using our own method against us was strategically sound. I respect it. Sungjin looked at his son for a long moment, then at Rebecca, then back at his son. Thank you, he said in the careful tone of a man accepting a compliment that had arrived in a very specific shape. You're welcome, Kai said, and returned to his rice. Anne looked at her mother. The photograph on top, she said, the front row one. You put that there on purpose. Yes, Rebecca said, because you knew I'd see it first and I wouldn't be able to just... She stopped. Put it down and walk away, Rebecca said. Anne looked at her plate. No, she said quietly. I couldn't. Rebecca reached over and put her hand briefly on Anne's. Anne looked up. I know, Rebecca said. They looked at each other. Mother and daughter. The same underneath smile on both their faces, the one that had been waiting, the one that was entirely theirs. Then Anne said, You still should have just asked us to talk. Would you have? Rebecca said. A pause. No, Anne said. Would you? Rebecca said to Kai. Kai ate his rice. Kai, she said. I'm thinking, he said. It's a yes or no. I'm being thorough, he said. He thought for another moment. Then, no, he said. Probably not. So, Sungjin said. So, Kai said. The plan was necessary. Competent and necessary, Rebecca said. Don't push it, Kai said. Anne laughed. The real one, short and sudden and entirely her own. Sungjin reached for the serving spoon, served himself more rice. Served Rebecca more rice without being asked, because he always did, because in 3 months he had learned exactly what she wanted before she said it, and had quietly decided that knowing it was its own kind of language. Rebecca noticed, filed it on her list, the list that was very long now and getting longer. Lunch continued. Anne was in the garden with her sketchbook. Kai was watching from the kitchen doorway in the specific way of someone watching the garden generally and not watching Anne specifically. Rebecca appeared beside him. Go and sit with her, she said. She's working, he said. Kai. She does her best drawing when nobody is... Kai. He went. Rebecca watched him cross the garden, and Anne shift on the step to make room without looking up, and Kai sit down and open his book, and neither of them say a single word to each other. She pressed her lips together. They're fine, Sungjin said from directly behind her, which she had not been expecting. She turned around. How long have you been standing there? Long enough, he said. She looked at him. He handed her a cup of coffee made exactly the way she liked it, without being asked. She took it, turned back to the garden. "We're good parents," she said. "Excellent parents," he said. "Top 5%, she said. "Conservatively," he said. Outside, Anne said, without looking up from her sketchbook, "Everything they planned. The chocolate, the photographs, the sour worms outside my door." "I saw the notepad," Kai said. Anne looked up. "So did I." A pause. "They tried." "They did," Kai said. "It was sweet," Anne said. "It was," Kai said. "For a first attempt." Anne looked at her sketchbook. "Ours was better." "Significantly better," Kai said. "We had a weather forecast. We had 3 contingency plans. We sat on a cold wall," Anne said. "I lost feeling in my foot." "You lost feeling in your foot," Kai confirmed. "For them. And what did they do? They printed some photographs and moved the chocolate 3 inches to the left." Anne shook her head slowly. 3 inches. "Amateur," Kai said, and turned a page. Anne almost said something. Then she said, "Don't tell them we said that." "Obviously," Kai said. Later, at the top of the stairs, Kai said goodnight to his father and was nearly at his door when Sung-jin said, very casually to both children, that after everything they had done today, getting them talking again, the emotional labour, the chocolate, the whole operation, he felt there should be compensation. Kai turned around. Anne appeared from her doorway. They looked at their father. Then Anne said, "Daddy, we are 10 years old. We are still babies, small, fragile, financially unstable babies. You cannot ask for compensation from Korea's most feared mafia boss's own children. That is simply not something babies can afford." "You cited a 3.7% interest rate at this same 10 years old," Sung-jin said. "That was pure luck," Anne said. "You built a 14-month strategic operation." "Did we?" Kai said. "We've regressed, significantly." "We can barely tie our shoes," Anne said. "I tie my shoes." "Perfectly," Kai said. "Kai." "We can barely tie our shoes," Kai said. Sung-jin looked at his children. These 2 10-year-olds standing in the corridor in their pyjamas, performing financial helplessness with the focused energy of people who had once checked weather forecasts and cited interest rates and lost feeling in a foot and called it a professional sacrifice. "Good night," he said. "Good night, Daddy," Anne said sweetly. "Good night," Kai said with the dignity of a man who had just successfully avoided a financial obligation. They went to their rooms. Sung-jin stood in the corridor. Then he went downstairs and told Rebecca, and they both laughed for longer than was strictly necessary. 10:30. The lights under both doors were on. The good kind, the kind that meant someone was awake and choosing to be, not the kind from the last 2 weeks that meant someone was awake and couldn't help it. A knock on Kai's door. He looked up from his book. Actually reading this time, pages turning and everything, and said yes. Anne was in the doorway, duvet around her shoulders like a coat, sour worms in her hand. She came in, sat on the end of his bed, opened the bag, held it out. "I don't like sour worms," he said. "You say that every time." "Because it's true every time." "You ate 2 this morning." "I was being polite." "You asked for a 3rd one." "I was being very polite," he said. She held the bag closer. He took one, ate it. His face went through the usual stages. Resistance, then reluctant acknowledgement, then the small defeated nod that meant, "Yes, fine, it's good," which Anne had learned to wait for and had never once commented on, because some victories were better kept quiet. She took one herself. They sat, her on the end of the bed, him at his desk, the sour worms between them, the desk 4 inches from the door, back where it was supposed to be. "The documentary tomorrow," Anne said. "Deep ocean," he said. "Bioluminescence." What's bioluminescence? Creatures that make their own light, he said. 2,000 meters down where no light gets in from the surface, so they just make their own. Anne thought about this. Is there a plot? She said. It's a nature documentary. The last one had a plot, and the plot was birds getting lost. I need to know in advance. There's a fish, he said. That grows a light on its head. Looks friendly. It isn't. Other fish come toward the light, and then... He made a small, conclusive gesture. That's dark, Anne said. It's the deep ocean, he said. It's all dark. I'll come, she said. He looked back at his book very carefully. Okay, he said. She ate another sour worm. Then she said, their plan today. The notepad. She crossed out 2 ideas before the album. I saw, he said. What do you think the other 2 were? Kai considered this seriously, in the way he considered all things seriously. First idea was probably just asking us to talk directly, he said. She crossed it out because she knew we'd say we were fine. Which we would have, Anne said. Obviously, Kai said. Second idea was probably something involving Kwon. She crossed it out because involving Kwon in a children's emotional situation is excessive, Anne said. Excessive, Kai agreed, so she landed on the album, which was, objectively, not bad, Anne said. Not bad, Kai said. The photograph on top was smart. She knew you wouldn't put it down. Anne looked at the wall. I couldn't, she said simply. I know. A pause. They did well, Anne said, for people who have only done this once. We had 14 months of practice, Kai said. They had 48 hours and a bag of chocolate. And Kwon's opinion on sour worms. And Kwon's opinion on sour worms, Kai agreed. Anne smiled. Still, ours was better. Ours was significantly better, Kai said. We had a weather forecast, a written agenda, interest calculations. You lost feeling in a foot. I lost feeling in my foot, Anne said solemnly. For them, and they moved chocolate 3 inches to the left. 3 inches, Kai said. We should tell them we know. We already told them we know, Kai said. We should tell them again, Anne said, so they understand that we know that we know. They know that we know, Kai said, and they know that we know that they know that we know. That's as far as it goes before it stops meaning anything. Anne thought about this. Okay, she said. Fine. She looked at the sour worms. Last one. You take it, he said. We'll split it, she said. You always split it, and somehow your half is... Kai. Absolutely equal, actually. Upon reflection, he said. She split it, handed him half. He took it without further comment. They ate the last sour worm in the good quiet of 2 children who had remembered how to be in the same room as each other and were not going to make a speech about it. Anne stood up, wrapped the duvet back around her, went to the door, stopped. Kai, she said. When you were going to say something, in the photograph, after the confetti. She paused. You can say it. Whenever. No rush. I'm not going anywhere. He looked at his book. I know, he said. She went. The door stayed open a crack. The light from the corridor came through it in a thin, warm line across the floor. Kai sat at his desk, looked at the crack of light, picked up his book, turned a page, and read it properly. It started small, the way the things that matter always start. Anne didn't finish her lunch on Monday. She said it tasted like nothing. She said everything today tasted like nothing, and it was. Probably just a Monday, and could she be excused? Rebecca said yes, and watched her go and stood at the kitchen counter for a moment after she left. Tuesday Anne came downstairs slower than usual, not dramatically, just slower, like the stairs had more stairs in them than they'd had the day before. She ate her toast triangles and argued about them with the same energy as always, and went to school and came home and did her homework and said goodnight and went to bed, and Rebecca told herself it was nothing. Wednesday, the tiredness was visible, the specific kind that sits in a person's face rather than their eyes, not sleepy, not worn out in the ordinary way, but present in the skin, in the colour, in the slight weight of simply being upright. Anne did not complain. Anne never complained. She filed things quietly and kept going and said she was fine in the bright, easy voice of someone who was completely fine. Rebecca looked at her daughter across the dinner table on Wednesday evening and the quiet list she had been keeping, the long, warm list of all the things she had noticed and wanted to remember forever, turned a page she had not been expecting. Thursday morning, Anne ate half her breakfast, pushed the rest around, said the orange juice tasted wrong. Not bad, just wrong. Like something was slightly off in everything, a small, persistent wrongness she couldn't locate or name. Kai watched this from across the table with his total maximum attention. He didn't say anything. He poured her a glass of water and put it beside her juice without being asked, and she drank it, and he went back to his toast, and neither of them said a word about it, but it sat between them all the way to school. Friday evening, Rebecca sat on the end of Anne's bed and asked how she was feeling. Anne said fine. Rebecca said Anne. Anne said she was just tired. She'd been tired all week. It was probably school. It was probably the weather. It was probably nothing. Rebecca looked at her daughter, at the colour of her face, at the way she was sitting with her duvet around her, even though the room was warm, at the small wrongness that had been accumulating for a week and had been filing itself quietly on the wrong list, the one Rebecca had not wanted to open. She was a mother. She had been watching this face for 10 years. She knew every version of it. The performing fine face, and the real fine face, and the tired face, and the sick face. She knew the difference between all of them the way she knew the difference between Anne's laughs, the surface one and the underneath one. This was not tired. This was something she did not have a name for yet, and did not want to name yet, and was going to name first thing in the morning regardless. She called Dr. Mensah on Saturday. Not the emergency line, the regular line. She said it wasn't urgent. She said she just wanted to bring Anne in for a check, routine, just to see, nothing specific. She said this in the voice of a woman who had something specific and was not ready to say it out loud. Dr. Mensah said Monday morning, first appointment. She said she would see her then. Rebecca said thank you and put the phone down and stood in the kitchen for a moment. Sung Jin came in. He looked at her face. She looked at his. She said it was probably nothing. She said Anne had been tired and she wanted to get some blood work done just to be sure, just to rule things out. It was most likely nothing. He said, okay. She said okay. Neither of them said anything else because the kitchen was warm and the children were upstairs, and some things you do not say in warm kitchens with children upstairs. Some things you carry to the door of, and then you wait. You wait until you know what you're carrying before you put it down. Monday morning. The hospital had the specific light of a place that was trying very hard to seem ordinary. Chairs in a row, a plant in the corner doing its best, a television on the wall with the sound off. Anne had asked why they were all coming. Rebecca said it was just a check. Anne said it was a lot of people for just a check. Kai said hospitals had parking for a reason. Anne looked at him. He looked at the window. She filed it and said nothing. They ran the tests, blood work, a scan, a few more things that Dr. Mensah ordered quietly, without explanation, in the tone of someone who was being careful. Anne sat through all of it with the composed patience of a child who had decided not to make a fuss, which was the specific composure that broke Rebecca's heart the most, because Anne only decided not to make a fuss when she understood that a fuss would not help. Kai sat beside her the entire time. He did not open his book. When the tests were done, Dr. Mensah asked Rebecca and Sung Jin to come with her, just the two of them. Anne looked at her mother. Rebecca touched her face briefly, told her they would be back in a few minutes, told her Kai was here, told her it was fine. She said it in the wrong voice. Anne heard it, filed it, said, "Okay." The office was small, one window, 2 chairs across from the desk. Dr. Mensah sat down and folded her hands and looked at them both, and Rebecca understood in the 2 seconds before she spoke that the folded hands were not a good sign. Folded hands meant what was coming required steadiness, required the body to be organized before the words arrived. Dr. Mensah told them what the tests had found: acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the most aggressive form. It had not been caught early. It had been moving quietly, the way it moved in children, quickly, completely, without announcement, and it had been moving for longer than any of them had known. She said some other things, about treatment, about options, about the conversations they would need to have, and the decisions they would need to make, and then she said the thing that took all the air out of the small room with one window. She said, without treatment, which given the stage, and the spread would be extremely difficult to pursue. Anne had approximately 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The room was very quiet after that. Not the warm quiet of a kitchen on a Sunday evening, not the good quiet of 2 children on a step in a garden. The other kind. The kind that has no floor. Rebecca was not aware of the moment she stopped breathing and started again. She was only aware of Sung Jin's hand, which had found hers at some point, which was holding hers with the specific grip of a man who had built a wall and watched 4 videos about egg whites and sat outside a door at 11:30 at night and had believed, had known, with the quiet certainty he applied to everything that mattered, that he could keep the things inside this house safe from everything outside it. His hand was shaking. She had never felt his hand shake before. She held it back. In the waiting room, Anne finished her drawing. She looked at it for a moment, then she turned the sketchbook so Kai could see. It was the garden. Sunday morning. The step. Both of them, him with his book, her with her sketchbook, drawn from outside the frame, from the angle of the kitchen doorway, from where Rebecca had been standing, watching them be ordinary together. Kai looked at it for a long time, at the 2 of them on the step, at the garden she had drawn around them, warm and unhurried, the way it had been, the way it still was, the way it would. He stopped that thought, folded it, put it somewhere he was not going to open yet. "Keep it," she said. He took it, folded it carefully, put it in his blazer pocket where the things that mattered went. Then Anne put her head on his shoulder. She had never done this before, not once. In all the months of sour worms and toast arguments and bioluminescence and bookshelf negotiations, she had simply put her head on his shoulder like it was something she had always been going to do and had simply been waiting for the right moment. Kai went very still, then he put his chin on top of her head. And they sat. At the end of the corridor the door was still closed. He looked at it, then he looked at the drawing in his blazer pocket, the corner of it visible above the edge, the pencil garden, the Sunday step, the 2 of them doing their separate things in each other's company on a morning that neither of them had known yet to keep. He looked at it, and he did not look away. Anne did not know. She sat on that bench with her head on Kai's shoulder, eating the last of the sour worms, and she did not know that 3 rooms away a doctor was telling her mother and her father that the girl on the bench had 3 weeks. 3 weeks from the Monday morning. 3 weeks from the toast triangles and the orange juice that tasted wrong and the glass of water Kai had poured without being asked. 3 weeks from the garden and the step and the drawing in the blazer pocket. She did not know. She was just sitting. Kai did not know either. He sat with his chin on top of her head and his book unopened in his lap, and he did not know that the girl leaning on him, the girl who had cited interest rates and moved furniture so sound travelled better and lost feeling in her foot on a cold wall and split every last sour worm down the middle, had 3 weeks. He did not know. He was just holding still. In that small office with one window, Korea's most feared man was not feared. He was just a father. Sung-jin had built an empire with his hands and his silence and his absolute refusal to be moved by anything the world put in front of him. He had walked into rooms that made other men leave. He had made decisions that could not be unmade. He had looked at things that required looking at and had not looked away. He could not look at this. He had money, more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. He had power and reach and men who answered on the first ring at any hour. He had restructured an entire empire, to build a wall so that nothing from out there could come in here, to this house, to this table, to these children, and this had come from inside, from a small wrongness in a 10-year-old girl's blood that had been moving quietly long before anyone thought to look for it. His money could not negotiate with this. His silence could not outlast this. And for the first time in 15 years of building things that could not be broken, Kwon Sung-jin sat in a small hospital chair and did not know what to do. Rebecca's hand was in both of his. He looked at her hands. This woman, who had made him sit in a tiny plastic chair, who had not moved for him when everyone moved, who had said yes to all of this with both hands steady and her eyes completely open, who was now sitting in a hospital office being told that her daughter, her Anne, her 10-year-old girl who organized books by color and said good morning to chairs and made the underneath smile that had been waiting her entire life, had 3 weeks. She was not crying. She was doing what she always did, holding, composing, being the last wall standing so that when they walked back out into that corridor and Anne looked up from that bench and searched her mother's face, as she would, because Anne always searched faces, Anne always knew, she would find something steady to hold on to. Rebecca was making herself steady. For Anne. Sung-jin looked at her doing it, and he made himself a promise in that small room with one window. He did not know yet what form the promise would take. He did not know what was coming, or what could be done, or whether anything could be done at all. He did not know if 3 weeks was the end of the story, or the beginning of a different one. But he knew this. He had dismantled things before. He would dismantle this too if there was anything left to dismantle. He would find every doctor, every specialist, every person in the world who had ever looked at this specific thing and found a way through it. He would go to every country. He would call in every favour. He would spend every last thing he had ever built. He would not sit in this chair and accept 3 weeks. Not for her, not for the girl on the bench who had lost feeling in her foot for him. And if all those didn't work, I'll give her the best life has to offer in 3 weeks, Sunji said. At the end of the corridor, the door opened. Anne looked up. She looked at her mother's face. She looked at her father's face. She was 10 years old, and she was the girl who filed things, and noticed everything, and knew every version of her mother's face, and had been sitting on this bench for 40 minutes, already knowing, in the quiet way she knew things before her head caught up, that something was wrong. She looked at them, and she knew. She reached out and took Kai's hand. He looked at her, then at his father, then back at Anne. He held her hand. Neither of them said anything. Their parents walked toward them, down the corridor, and Anne sat very still and held Kai's hand. And the drawing was in his pocket, and the garden was still there, and the step was still there, and the sour worms were finished, and she had 3 weeks, and she did not know yet that her father had just made a promise in a small room, and that Korea's most feared man had never in his life broken a promise. Not once, not ever. Part 5 is coming, and the question is not whether Sung-jin will fight. The question is whether the fight is enough. Does Anne make it? Does a miracle find its way to a girl who spent her whole life making room for other people? Does the most feared man in Korea find the one thing his power was always meant for? We don't know yet, but we know this. Anne is still on that bench. Kai is still holding her hand, and some things, the things that are everything, are worth every last fight left in you. Drop part 5 in the comments right now. Tell us where you are watching from. And tell us, do you believe in miracles? If you're new here, please hit the subscription button and notification bell, as this is the only way you can support us. Part 5 is coming.